The world for the little boy was not a simple place. It was a place of intense and often frightening sensations. A sound as common as a dog barking nearby wasn't just a single noise to him. It was a sudden, sharp explosion that rattled through his entire small body, making him flinch and cover his ears. The feel of a clothing tag against the back of his neck was not a minor itch but a constant, scraping distraction that could make him cry out in frustration. He saw patterns in everything, in the lines on the wooden floor, in the way dust motes danced in a sunbeam, and any change to these patterns felt like the world was tilting off its axis. His name was Leo. When he was 4 years old, after his parents had spent years swinging between worry and confusion, a doctor gave them a word for the way Leo experienced life: autism. For his grandmother, a kind and patient woman named Eleanor, the word was an answer. It was a key that helped her begin to understand her grandson's beautiful and unique mind. She saw that when he was overwhelmed, he needed to rock gently. She learned that he could not look people directly in the eye, but he showed his love in other ways, like resting his head against her arm. But for Leo's mother, Carol, the word autism felt like a life sentence. She was a young mother who had pictured a different life for herself and her son. She had imagined playdates filled with laughter, birthday parties with crowds of friends, and a son who would run into her arms without hesitation. Instead, their life was a whirlwind of doctor's appointments, speech therapy sessions, and moments of public embarrassment. When Leo would become overwhelmed in a grocery store by the bright lights and loud announcements, he would sometimes sink to the floor, his hands over his ears, making a low hum to block it all out. People would stare. Some would offer sympathetic smiles, but others would whisper and judge. Carol felt every stare like a pinprick. She felt they were all judging her, thinking she was a bad mother who couldn't control her child. The strain began to wear on her. She grew short-tempered. "Why can't you just be normal?" she would sometimes snap, immediately feeling guilty but too tired to take the words back. She started spending more time at work, or with friends, leaving Leo more and more in the care of Eleanor. The love she had for her son was still there, but it was buried under a mountain of resentment, exhaustion, and a deep, unspoken grief for the normal life she felt she had lost. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Leo was 7 years old. He had been having a particularly difficult day. The sound of the rain hitting the window panes was bothering him, and he had been building a complex tower out of colored blocks. The tower was a masterpiece of symmetry and balance, each block placed with intense concentration. Carol, trying to get him ready for another appointment, accidentally bumped the table. The tower swayed for a heart-stopping moment and then collapsed into a chaotic pile of blocks. For Leo, this was not just a fallen toy. It was the destruction of his entire ordered world. The world he had so carefully built had been shattered in an instant. A wail of pure, unfiltered anguish tore from his throat. He screamed and cried, his small body trembling with the force of his upset. Instead of trying to comfort him, Carol felt something inside her snap. All the sleepless nights, the judgmental looks, the feeling of being trapped in a life she never wanted came flooding over her. She looked at her son, lost in his storm of feelings, and she felt only a cold, hard distance. "Enough," she yelled, her voice sharp and loud, cutting through his cries. "I have had enough. I can't live like this anymore." Leo, startled by her yell, quieted for a moment, his breath hitching in sobs. He looked at her, his eyes wide and confused. Just then, Eleanor came rushing into the room, her face filled with concern. "What is going on in here?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Carol turned on her own mother, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and despair. This is what's going on!" She gestured wildly at Leo, who was now hiding behind Eleanor's legs. "I can't do it, Mom, I can't. This is not what I signed up for. He's too much. He's your problem now." The words hung in the air, cold and final. Eleanor stared at her daughter, unable to believe what she was hearing. "What are you saying, Carol?" "He is your son." "I'm saying I'm done," Carol said, her voice dropping to a tired whisper. She walked out of the room and went to her bedroom. Eleanor stayed with Leo, holding him close, rocking him gently until his sobs subsided into quiet sniffles. An hour later, Carol emerged from her room, dragging a large suitcase. She wouldn't even look at Leo. "Carol, please, let's talk about this," Eleanor pleaded. "Don't do this." "There's nothing to talk about," Carol said, her voice flat. "I'll send money every month. That's all I can give him." And with that, she walked out the front door. The sound of the car engine starting and then fading away down the street was one of the loudest, most painful sounds Eleanor had ever heard. She held Leo tight, feeling the weight of the future settle onto her shoulders. She looked down at her grandson, who was clutching the hem of her sweater, his face pale and tear-streaked. He didn't fully understand what had just happened, but he understood the feeling of abandonment, the terrifying quiet that his mother had left behind. Eleanor made a silent promise to him then and there. She would not break. She would be his rock, his safe place, his home. It was just the two of them now, alone against the world. The silence in the small house after Carol left was a heavy thing. For the first few weeks, the little boy, Leo, would sometimes wander to the window, his eyes searching the street for a familiar car that never came. He didn't cry much, but he became quieter, retreating further into his own world. His grandmother, Eleanor, watched him with a heart that ached for his loss. She knew that words alone would not heal this wound. She had to show him, through every action, every day, that he was loved and that he was safe. Eleanor was a retired librarian. Her life had been one of quiet order, surrounded by books and stories. Now she used that same patience and love for order to build a new world for her grandson. She saw that the loud, chaotic outside world was a source of pain for him. So she turned their home into a sanctuary. She kept the lights soft. She made sure there were always his favorite snacks in the cupboard. She learned which fabrics he found comfortable and bought him clothes made from them. The house ran on a gentle, predictable rhythm. Breakfast at 8 a.m., a walk in the quiet park at 10 a.m., lunch at noon. This routine was not a cage for Leo. It was the walls that held his world together, making him feel secure. Eleanor quickly realized that trying to force Leo to be like other children was a losing battle. Instead, she decided to step into his world. His interests were not just hobbies. They were deep, all-consuming passions. When he became fascinated by the spinning cycle of the washing machine, she didn't pull him away. She sat with him, watching the clothes tumble. "Tell me what you see," she would ask him softly. He would point, his words sometimes hard to find. The patterns. The blue shirt, it follows the red sock. It's a dance. And Eleanor would nod, seeing the beautiful logic in his mind. It is a dance, she would agree. A very organized one. She saw that while he struggled with spoken words, he could speak volumes through pictures and through the logic of computers. When he was 10, she used a large part of her savings to buy him a proper computer. It was not a fancy one, but to Leo it was a magic box, a universe of pure logic where everything made sense. He taught himself how to use it, his fingers flying across the keyboard, learning a language of code that was far easier for him to understand than the confusing rules of small talk or eye contact. Their life settled into a new kind of normal. It was a quiet life, just the two of them, but it was filled with a deep and understanding love. Eleanor was his translator for the world, and he was her window into a different way of seeing things. The real turning point came because of their next-door neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Dalton. Mr. Dalton was a kind, forgetful man who lived alone. Leo would often watch him from their living room window. He noticed things. He saw that Mr. Dalton sometimes watered his plants twice in one day or not at all. He saw the man standing on his porch looking confused as if he had forgotten why he walked outside. One day there was a commotion. An ambulance was parked outside Mr. Dalton's house. He had forgotten to take his important heart medicine for 3 days in a row and had fallen. Luckily, he was okay, but it was a terrible scare. That evening, Leo was unusually quiet. He sat at the kitchen table, not touching his dinner. "What is it, sweetheart?" Eleanor asked. "Are you worried about Mr. Dalton?" Leo shook his head, not in no, but as if he was rearranging thoughts in his mind. "His system is broken," he said finally. "His system?" "He needs a better system," Leo explained, his eyes focused on something far away. "A system that doesn't forget." He got up, found a stack of paper and a box of colored pencils, and began to draw. He didn't draw pictures of people or cars. He drew screens. He drew boxes with words inside them. He drew arrows showing how one thing led to another. He created a step-by-step guide for Mr. Dalton's entire day. Wake up was the first box, with an arrow pointing to take blue pill. That box had an arrow pointing to brush teeth. He drew a little check mark next to each task. He used different colors for different parts of the day. It was a beautiful, complex, and perfectly logical map of a daily routine. Eleanor looked at the drawing, her breath catching in her throat. This wasn't just a child's doodle. This was a solution. This was how Leo's mind worked. It found problems in patterns and created new, better patterns to fix them. "Leo," she whispered, her voice full of wonder. "This is brilliant." He looked up at her, a rare, small smile touching his lips. "It needs to be on the computer. It needs to make a sound when it's time. A nice sound. Not a scary one." And so their biggest project together began. Eleanor knew nothing about computer programming, but she sat beside Leo every evening after he finished his schoolwork. He was the engineer, the visionary. She was his assistant, his questioner. "Would a button here be better than text?" she would ask. "What if the user wants to change the time? What kind of sound is a nice sound?" She helped him break down his huge, amazing idea into small, manageable steps. She used her librarian's mind to help him research and organize his thoughts. When he would get frustrated because a piece of code wouldn't work, she wouldn't tell him to give up. She would make them both a cup of tea and say, "Let's look at it with fresh eyes in 10 minutes. The answer is there. We just have to find it." For years, this was their shared life. The outside world saw a quiet boy and his elderly grandmother, living a simple, isolated life. But inside their home, they were pioneers. They were building something. The app, which Leo named TaskPath, began to take shape. It was more than a reminder app. It was a visual guide for your day. It used calming colors, gentle chimes, and a satisfying visual checkoff system that made following a routine feel like completing a rewarding puzzle. It was a tool born from Leo's own need for order, refined through his care for Mr. Dalton, and nurtured by his grandmother's unwavering belief. They didn't know if anyone else would ever use it. For them, the journey of creating it had already been the reward. It had given them a purpose, a shared language, and a bond that was stronger than any hardship. The boy who was once seen as a problem had become a problem solver, all because one person had chosen to build a bridge into his world, instead of demanding that he cross over into hers. The project that started on a piece of paper for Mr. Dalton grew over the years, slowly and steadily, like a tree taking root in their quiet living room. The TaskPath app became the center of Leo and Eleanor's world. For Leo, now a young man, it was his life's work. For Eleanor, it was a way to watch her grandson blossom. Their days followed a comfortable pattern. Leo would spend hours at the computer, his focus absolute. The world outside would fade away as he built his digital universe, line of code by line of code. He had a natural gift for it. Where other people saw confusing text, he saw a beautiful, logical structure. He could hold complex problems in his mind and slowly, patiently piece together the solutions. Eleanor was his first and most important tester. She would sit with the app on a tablet, her reading glasses perched on her nose, and try to break it. "Leo, what happens if I press the done button before I finish the task?" she would ask, or, "The sound for the medication reminder is a little too soft. My old ears can't hear it from the kitchen." Leo would listen carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. He never got angry at the feedback. He saw it as a puzzle to be solved. He would nod, make a note, and go back to his computer to refine the code. He was building the app not just for himself or for Mr. Dalton, but for anyone who found the chaos of daily life overwhelming. The app was special. It wasn't loud or flashy. It used soft, calming colors, muted blues, and gentle greens. The sounds were not jarring alarms, but clear, melodic chimes. Completing a task didn't just make it disappear. It filled the task box with a soft green color and showed a small, satisfying star. It made organization feel less like a chore and more like a peaceful, rewarding game. After nearly 2 years of this quiet work, Eleanor felt it was ready. "People need this, Leo," she said one evening over dinner. "There are others out there who struggle, just in different ways. We should share it." Leo was nervous. Sharing his creation felt like opening a door to the loud, unpredictable world he had always tried to shield himself from. But he trusted his grandmother. So with a deep breath, he pressed the button to publish TaskPath on a major app store. They set the price to free, hoping it would just help people. Then they waited, expecting maybe a handful of downloads. For the first week, almost nothing happened. A few downloads here and there. Leo tried to hide his disappointment. But Eleanor remained cheerful. "Even if it helps one person, it was worth it," she told him. Then a small miracle happened. A well-known blogger, a woman who wrote about her family's life with her son's attention deficit disorder, stumbled upon the app. She tried it out of curiosity. She was amazed. She wrote a long, passionate review titled, "Finally, an app that understands my son's brain." She described how the visual steps and gentle rewards had transformed their morning routine from a stressful battle into a peaceful, cooperative process. She wrote, "The developer, who I understand is a young man on the autism spectrum himself, hasn't just made an app. He has built a bridge. He understands the need for structure without stress, for reminders without reprimands." That blog post was like a spark in a dry forest. It was shared thousands of times. Parents of children with special needs, university students struggling with their workload, elderly people wanting to maintain their independence, they all found TaskPath. The downloads started to trickle in, then they became a steady stream, and then a flood. Comments and emails poured into the app's support account, which Eleanor managed. People poured their hearts out. "Thank you, I can finally get my father to take his pills without an argument. My son with autism uses this to get ready for school. It has changed our lives. I've never been able to stick to a schedule before. This makes it feel possible." Eleanor would read the best ones out loud to Leo. He would sit quietly, listening, a look of profound wonder on his face. He wasn't just seeing download numbers. He was hearing stories. He was realizing that the very thing that made him different was allowing him to help people. The wall he had built to protect himself from the world had become a window through which he could connect with it. The local newspaper did a story. Then a major tech website picked it up. The headline read, "Reclusive young developer creates a $3.2 million sensation from his grandmother's living room." The number, $3.2 million, was an estimate of the app's worth based on its huge user base and future potential. It was a number so big that neither Leo nor Eleanor could truly grasp it. Money had never been the goal. The real success for them was in the stories, in the knowledge that their little project was making a real difference. Reporters and even a few business people started calling the house, asking for interviews, offering to buy the app. Eleanor, acting as Leo's protector and manager, politely declined most of them. She knew the spotlight would be too much for him. Their life was still quiet. They still had their routines. But now there was a new feeling in the air, a feeling of quiet pride and immense accomplishment. The boy who had been deserted, who had been seen as a burden, had used his unique gift to create something of great value. He and his grandmother, working together in their little sanctuary, had built a beacon of help and hope for thousands. They had no idea that this very success was about to shatter the peaceful world they had so carefully built. The light from their beacon was shining brightly, and it was about to attract someone from their past, someone they had not seen or heard from in a very, very long time. Life in the small house had settled into a new, brighter kind of normal. The success of TaskPath hadn't changed their daily routines, but it had changed the air they breathed. There was a quiet confidence, a feeling of security that hadn't been there before. The worries about money, which had always been a faint humming anxiety in the background, had simply vanished. Eleanor could buy a new refrigerator without having to save for months. Leo could order any computer part he needed without a second thought. It was a freedom they had never known. They decided to use the money to make their world a little better. They didn't buy a flashy car or a big house. Instead, they soundproofed Leo's room, making it a perfect sanctuary for when the world became too loud. They built a small heated greenhouse in the backyard for Eleanor, where she could grow her flowers year-round. Their happiness was quiet and deeply personal. One afternoon, a sleek silver car, the kind that looked out of place on their modest street, pulled up to the curb. Eleanor was in her greenhouse and Leo was in his room, fine-tuning a new feature for the app. Eleanor saw the car and felt a strange, cold knot form in her stomach. She watched as the driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. She was dressed in a sharp, expensive-looking business suit. Her hair was styled perfectly. She looked successful, powerful, and entirely unfamiliar for a moment. Then she turned and the sunlight caught her face. Eleanor's blood ran cold. It was her daughter. It was Carol. It had been 18 years. The young, tired, and angry woman who had left was gone, replaced by this polished stranger. Carol stood for a moment looking at the house with an unreadable expression. Then she turned and spoke to someone still in the passenger seat. A man in a dark suit got out. He carried a thin, professional-looking briefcase. A lawyer. The knot in Eleanor's stomach tightened into a hard ball of fear. This was not a social call. She quickly walked inside, her heart pounding. She went to the bottom of the stairs. "Leo," she called out, trying to keep her voice calm. "Stay in your room for a little while, please. We have visitors." Before Leo could answer, the doorbell rang. Its chime, usually a soft sound, felt like a shock through the quiet house. Eleanor took a deep breath, smoothed her simple gardening apron, and opened the door. Carol stood there, a tight, hesitant smile on her face. "Hello, Mother." "Carol," Eleanor said, her voice flat. Her eyes moved past her daughter to the man. "Who is this?" "This is my legal counsel," Carol said, her voice smooth and practiced. "May we come in?" Eleanor wanted to say no. She wanted to slam the door, but she knew she couldn't. She stepped back, allowing them to enter the home Carol had abandoned so long ago. The lawyer's eyes scanned the living room, taking in the comfortable, worn-out sofa, the bookshelves filled with old books, the simple decor. His expression was neutral, but Eleanor felt judged. Carol sat on the edge of the sofa as if afraid to get too comfortable. "You look well," she said to her mother. "What is this about, Carol?" Eleanor asked, refusing to play this game. She remained standing, her arms crossed over her chest. Carol's smile faded. She glanced at the lawyer, who gave a slight nod. "It's about Leo," she began. I saw the articles about his app. I'm so surprised and proud." Eleanor said nothing. She just waited. "I know I haven't been present," Carol continued, choosing her words carefully, "and I carry a lot of guilt about that. But I never stopped being his mother. A mother has a natural concern for her child's well-being, especially when such a large amount of money is involved." The lawyer, seeing Carol falter, stepped in. His voice was calm and professional, like a doctor delivering bad news. "Mrs. Eleanor, my client, as Leo's biological mother, has a fundamental and legal interest in his welfare. The sudden acquisition of significant wealth can be destabilizing for any young person, but especially for one with unique needs." He opened his briefcase and took out a small folder. "We are not here to cause trouble. We are here to propose a solution. Carol would like to be reinstated as a legal guardian. This would allow her to help manage Leo's finances, to ensure his long-term security, and to provide the maternal guidance he has missed." Eleanor felt a hot surge of anger. She looked past the lawyer, directly at her daughter. "Maternal guidance?" she repeated, her voice trembling with rage she was fighting to control. "You left him. You called him a problem. You didn't send a birthday card for 18 years. You don't even know what his voice sounds like now. And you come here with a lawyer to talk about maternal guidance?" Carol flinched, but the lawyer remained steady. "The past is complicated and feelings are understandably high. But from a legal standpoint, the bond of motherhood is powerful. My client has fulfilled her basic financial obligation through child support all these years. She has never formally terminated her parental rights. We believe a family court would look favorably on a mother seeking to reconnect and protect her son's future." He slid a piece of paper across the coffee table. It was a formal-looking document. "This outlines a proposed arrangement for shared financial stewardship. We are prepared to file a petition with the court to formalize this." Just then, a floorboard creaked. They all turned. Leo was standing in the doorway to the hallway. He had heard everything. His face was pale, his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. He wasn't looking at the lawyer. He was staring directly at the woman in the business suit, the stranger who was his mother. The room was utterly silent. Carol stood up, her face trying to form a warm, motherly expression. It looked unnatural on her. "Leo?" she said, her voice soft. "My goodness, look at you." Leo didn't move. He didn't speak. His eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and recognition, just watched her. Eleanor's heart broke for him. This was his greatest fear. The unpredictable, the confrontation, the stranger from his past invading his safe space. "Leo, sweetheart," Eleanor said gently. "It's okay. You can go back upstairs," but Leo didn't go. He took a small, hesitant step forward. He looked from his grandmother's worried face to his mother's pleading one, and then to the lawyer's neutral mask. The silence in the room was heavy, waiting for his response. The young man who found words so difficult was now facing the most important moment of his life, and everyone was waiting to see if he would speak. The silence in the room felt like a physical weight. All eyes were on Leo. He stood in the doorway, a young man caught in a storm he never asked for. He could feel his heart beating fast in his chest, a frantic drum against his ribs. The urge to turn around, to run back to his room and hide under the blankets was almost overwhelming. This was everything he hated. The confrontation, the strange faces, the feeling of his safe space being invaded. He looked at his grandmother. He saw the fear and anger in her eyes, but also a deep, steady strength. She was his rock. Then he looked at the other woman. His mother. The word felt hollow and strange in his mind. He searched her face for something familiar, for a memory, for a feeling of comfort. He found nothing. She was just a stranger in a sharp suit, her eyes calculating, not loving. The lawyer cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Leo," he began in that smooth professional voice. "My name is..." Leo flinched, putting a hand up slightly. The direct address was too much. The lawyer stopped, looking slightly surprised. Carol took a small step forward. "Leo, it's me. It's your mother," she said, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "I've missed you so much. I'm here now. I want to help you." Leo's eyes narrowed. He didn't understand the complicated rules of social lies. He understood patterns, cause and effect, and truth. Her words did not match the pattern of her actions. It was a system error. His voice, when it finally came, was quiet but clear. It wasn't the voice of a scared little boy. It was the voice of a young man who had built his own world from the ground up. "You left," he said, the words simple and direct. He wasn't being cruel. He was just stating a fact the way he saw it. The door was there. You walked through it. You did not come back. The directness of it hit Carol like a slap. The carefully constructed mask of the concerned mother cracked. It wasn't that simple, Leo," she stammered. "I was young. I was struggling. You have to understand." Leo shook his head slowly. He didn't have to understand. He knew what had happened. He looked at the lawyer. "You want to talk about money?" The lawyer tried to regain control. "We want to talk about protecting your interests, Leo. This is a very large sum for someone your age. Your mother has a legal right..." "My mother," Leo interrupted, his gaze shifting back to Eleanor, who was watching him with tears welling in her eyes, "is her. She is the one. She stayed." He pointed a finger at Carol, but he still looked at Eleanor. "She is a biological relative, but she is not my mother." The room was so quiet you could hear the old clock ticking in the hallway. Eleanor finally moved. She walked over to her desk, a small, cluttered piece of furniture in the corner of the room. Her hands were steady as she opened a drawer. She pulled out a thick, heavy binder. She carried it over and placed it on the coffee table with a soft thud. "This," Eleanor said, her voice strong now, filled with a mother's fury, "is the past you want to be part of so badly." She opened the binder. The first page was a faded official document. "This is the custody agreement you signed, giving me full legal guardianship." She turned the page. "These are the bank statements showing every single child support payment you ever made. It was the bare minimum, and it stopped the month he turned 18. She kept turning pages. "These are his medical records. Every doctor's appointment, every therapy session you never attended. These are his school reports. The parent-teacher conferences you never showed up for. These are photographs. His birthdays, his school graduations. You are in none of them." She looked directly at the lawyer. "You talk about the bond of motherhood. Show me the bond here. Show me one piece of paper, one photograph, one birthday card that proves it." The lawyer was silent. He looked at the binder, at the mountain of evidence of a life lived without this woman. Carol had sunk back onto the sofa, her face ashen. She had nothing to say. Leo spoke again, his voice quieter now but firm. "I do not want you in my life. I do not want your help. The answer is no." That was it. There was no arguing with that simple, honest truth. The lawyer slowly closed his briefcase. He knew a lost case when he saw one. No judge in the world would look at that binder and side with Carol. Her claim was empty and the court would see it. "Come on, Carol," the lawyer said quietly. "Let's go." Carol stood up. She didn't look at Leo. She didn't look at Eleanor. She just walked out of the house, her head bowed, the picture of defeat. The sleek silver car started and drove away, disappearing from their street as quickly as it had arrived. The front door closed, and the house was quiet once more. The heavy, stressful feeling in the air began to slowly dissolve. Leo let out a long, shaky breath. The tension left his shoulders. He walked over to the window and looked out at the empty street. Eleanor came and stood beside him. She didn't hug him. knowing he didn't always like sudden touch. Instead, she simply stood there, her presence a comfort. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He nodded, still looking out the window. "It was loud inside my head." He paused. "But it is quiet now." They stood in silence for a few moments, the two of them against the world, just as it had always been. "That binder," Leo said. "You kept all of that?" "Of course I did," Eleanor said. "I always knew I had to protect you. I just never knew from what. Or from who." A few months later, a formal-looking letter arrived. It was from a lawyer, but it was their lawyer now. The petition from Carol had been formally withdrawn. She would not be challenging them again. The threat was over for good. The experience, as painful as it was, did not break them. It made them stronger. It clarified their purpose. One evening, Leo was working at his computer. He opened a new file. He called it the Guardian Project. He turned to his grandmother. "The money, we should use it to help others who are like me, who have people who don't understand them." Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "That's a wonderful idea, Leo." And so they started a small foundation. It provided grants for families who couldn't afford therapy, for schools to buy assistive technology, and for young adults on the spectrum to pursue their dreams in fields like technology and art. Leo's story was no longer just about a boy who was left behind. It was no longer just about an app that made money. It was about a boy and his grandmother, whose love built a sanctuary. It was about how that sanctuary became a workshop, and how that workshop built a tool that helped thousands. And now it was about how that success was being used to build more sanctuaries for others. The mother who deserted him had tried to take a piece of his success, but in doing so, she had only helped him discover his true purpose. His legacy would not be a bank account, but a foundation of hope, built on the unbreakable bond he shared with the grandmother who never, ever left his side.